Hi, I'm Shelley Wood. You might know me from shelleywood.com. This is my tiny sewing room where I make doll clothes sewing videos. Today I'm going to show you how to make this lovely blue sweater to fit 28-inch dolls like Mattel's 28-inch Barbie. Before we begin, please go to shelleywood.com to download these free patterns. There's a bodice and a fitted sleeve pattern. You'll find a helpful link to my website in the description below this video on YouTube. Use the free printable patterns to cut these pieces from cotton or flannel fabric, and then you'll also cut these pieces from sweater fabric. Now, sweater fabric is often stretchy, soft, and feels like a sweater, obviously. You can buy it at fabric stores. You can buy it with a pattern. I'm using the blue. But one thing to be aware of is that it may not react well when you iron it. So take a swatch of fabric and practice with your iron before you begin this project. Now use a light box or window to draw the darts on your bodice. You can see I have my bodice lining, and behind it on my light box is my pattern, and I'm using fabric drawing chalk to draw that on both sides of the bodice lining. That would be the cotton or the flannel bodice front. Fold it and sew the darts following the lines that you've marked. And here you see me folding it and then sewing along the lines that I've marked. And then I tie a knot and trim my thread, and then I'm going to trim the excess fabric from the darts. Now darts can add dimension to the bodice, as you can see in this photo. Now we're going to follow the same steps creating darts in the sweater fabric's bodice on the front piece. So again, you would want to mark it with chalk and then sew that dart line and trim away the excess from both sides. There's a quick clip showing me trimming. Place one bodice front on top of another with right sides facing and pin along the neckline. So right sides facing means whatever is the most attractive side of the fabric is going to be against the attractive side of the fabric for the lining. Sew the two bodices together where you've pinned. I use a scant sort of 1/4 inch or 4mm stitch. Clip the neck seam. Be careful anytime you clip seams to make sure you don't go through where you've sewn. Invert the bodice front as you see in this next clip. So invert so that the pretty side is out, and press the seam flat with a hot iron. Remember to be careful with irons on sweater fabric. Please set the bodice front aside for a moment and let's work with the bodice's back. Begin with a sweater fabric piece and a lining piece. Place one on top of the other, again right sides facing, and pin around the neck, the back, and the waist areas as you see here. So I flip it over, I pin the neck, I pin the back, and then I pin down at the base of it where it will be kind of near the waist. Sew the back closure area, removing pins as you go, and clip the seams. Now you're ready to invert it after you clip the seams. When you clip your seams, you'll want to make sure that you trim off those corners real nice. And when I invert my back, or any part, I like to use a chopstick because they're nice and small for doll clothes. You can buy an actual inverting tool, but a chopstick works really well for doll clothes. Now press the seams flat. Remember, hot irons can damage that sweater fabric, so be careful. Follow these steps for both your backs. Place one back on top of the bodice front piece, keeping those right sides together. And here you see me doing that. Sew across the shoulder seam, again 1/4 inch seam allowance. Open that seam up and then place the other back on top of your bodice front and sew across this shoulder seam as well. Now open the whole bodice up like this and press the shoulder seams to flatten them. Now it's time to work with the sleeves. Place one sleeve on top of another with right sides facing. Pin where there would be a cuff if we were making a cuff, so that would be along the wrist area. Sew the two sleeves together where you had pinned, again 1/4 inch seam allowance. And here's a close-up so you can see my stitches. Flip the sleeve pieces open. Press the cuff seam flat. It's not really a cuff. And invert. Do this for both sleeves, and now your right side should be outside of the sleeve. You're going to begin stitching the sleeve to the bodice with right sides facing, starting at the underarm. You sew from the underarm to just before you reach the shoulder seam. Knot and trim your thread right before you reach the shoulder seam. Then you kind of flip the garment around and sew from the other underarm to the shoulder seam. Now that's kind of tricky to do, so I did a little video clip to show you. Here I am sewing at the beginning from underarm to shoulder. My right sides are together. And then I flip it around and I continue sewing from that other underarm up to that shoulder seam. Now when I reach the shoulder seam, I knot my thread, even though it seems like you're unfinished, and you can see I can stick my fingers right through there, so it's not a completed seam. See that gap in the top of the sleeve? Because doll clothes are so tiny, even with fitted sleeves, they sometimes don't match up perfectly. So what I like to do is gather that extra fabric, if I have some, at the top of the sleeve to make the sleeve and bodice match up. Now once I've got them so they match, then I attach the sleeve across the shoulder. The next video clip shows me doing all these steps. Okay, so you can see there's a gap, and now I'm gathering the fabric to even it up so they're the same length, and then I stitch the sleeve onto that shoulder seam. Attach both of the sweater sleeves using this underarm to shoulder method. You'll notice it doesn't make a puffed sleeve, it just makes a nice even sleeve. Fold one sleeve in half by flipping the back onto the bodice's front like you see here, and then pin from the sleeve's cuff area, the wrist, to the underarm, and then from the underarm to just a little bit shy of the bottom of the garment. You want to not sew clear to the bottom. You want to sew only where you have pinned from what would be a cuff to the underarm, and then from the underarm to just almost not quite the bottom, maybe like a centimeter before you get to the bottom. Follow these steps on both sides of the bodice of the garment. Fold the front's raw edges between the two fabrics and whip stitch to close the bodice's front edge. So here we are, we've got that front edge with raw edges. We fold them inside themselves, and then we do a whip stitch to close that off like a hem. Now you're ready to sew the sides closed. to want to do that on both sides of the sweater. Ready to invert the garment? And here's a little clip to show me inverting the garment. Invert means right side out. Again, I use my chopstick to help me with those narrow sleeves. Add a few snaps down the back. And now you're ready to try it on your doll. Oh, she's so cute. For more free printable sewing patterns for dolls of many shapes and different sizes, remember to go to shelleywood.com. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos and my free patterns, remember to tell your friends about my website, where you can find free patterns for doll clothes like this dress. Goodbye.